Morena tātou te whānau. Welcome to day 22 of Alert Level 4 lockdown across Aotearoa, New Zealand, our rāhui, to ensure that we all keep safe and that we protect particularly those most at risk, which notably, as has been articulated brilliantly by people far smarter than myself, are not just our elderly, but also a number of New Zealanders across the country who have underlying conditions, many of which you probably wouldn't know about simply by looking at people. Morena to Averill and morena as well to my friend Hannah, who I can see is watching. Today I want to talk about really briefly notions of inequality, morena Anna, morena Simran, that have come to the fore during this pandemic. And I've spoken about it quite extensively already. You can probably see that I'm somewhat kind of, very interested in this topic. And I think I retain that it was best summarised by Iona Holstead, who's the Secretary of Education to the Ministry of Education, who stated that this pandemic has not created inequities, it has merely exposed them. And over the past few weeks, what we've started to see is a really meaningful and well overdue dialogue about the need for all of us to be valued, to have the resilience in our bank accounts, to have the safe, warm, secure, dry home that contributes to a sense of well-being, a sense of place where we can put our roots down to build a community and, God forbid, know our neighbours and feel as though we belong. Everybody is entitled to those things, and the way that my friend and colleague, Member of Parliament, Green MP, Gauri's Gadaman put it in her maiden speech when speaking actually about human rights, is that we deserve these things not because we are good or great, but because we are human. And that fundamentally is the conversation around dignity. All people are capable of all different value sets, and all of us sometimes look at each other and go, what are you up to? But we should not be those to cast judgments about whether people deserve the basics to survive. I think fundamentally we can all agree that we all do. So of the conversation that's kind of come to the fore in the past few weeks, I really want to draw to attention an op-ed that was written by my friend Marlon Drake, who is an organiser for the Living Wage campaign, so full, free and frank, that is obviously what he's interested in, but he also has a background in political organising. And Marlon is just honestly one of the greatest young minds that I have met in this country to date in terms of organising at a grassroots level. But he wrote a really compelling piece for Stuff, and I just wanted to read a really short extract of that out this morning, because I think that it helps to frame what we're talking about really well. So this is an op-ed called Our Essential Workers Should All Be on a Living Wage by Marlon Drake, published yesterday, April 15th, in Stuff. And it reads, and I quote, "Every single person in Aotearoa is deserving of dignity. Our dignity is dependent on our quality of life, which is tied to our income. It's our ability to purchase healthy food and heat our homes. It's also the odd bar of chocolate and having time to spend with our family. A decent income for decent work allows us to make choices to live a good life. I've been thinking a lot lately about the role of our essential service workers, whether they are a nurse, supermarket worker, cleaner, or somebody else. Helping to provide an essential service, they are risking their own health and that of their families to do the work of keeping Aotearoa afloat. I simply cannot understand how it is fair that someone who restocks the shelves to keep food on our tables at home struggles to put food on theirs. I cannot understand how it's allowed that the people keeping our hospitals open and clean, working day and night, might be struggling to pay rent. The COVID-19 lockdown has highlighted inequalities that have existed since before the pandemic, and it's making us ask ourselves some tough questions. One of these rings loud. How can we allow our essential workers who get up and leave their bubble every day in the midst of the pandemic to do work to be paid anything less than a wage that they can live on? Now, the really important kind of takeaway from that's just a short extract from Marlon Drake for those of you who have just joined us now on his op-ed and stuff. The really important core tenet of what Marlon is proposing here is that these inequalities existed well before the pandemic did, and the value of these frontline essential workers is going to continue well after the pandemic ceases and we eliminate it. And that's kind of the point, right? Is that it really comes into our focus. It highlights the importance of the work that we do when our context or our environment shifts or changes, but it doesn't change the core basics necessarily of the job that somebody was undertaking, particularly if you think about the role of people like our cleaners, which Marlon does go on to speak about. Sorry, I'm pointing to my laptop, which Marlon does go on to speak about in his opinion editorial piece. Those cleaners who are doing the often unseen work at all kinds of hours of the night. I remember once in Parliament, Parliament is made up of a number of different buildings, and my office is in a place called Bowen House. I remember after a really long night in the chamber where we were voting on end-of-life choice, which meant that Parliament didn't rise until about 1 a.m. So yes, your parliamentarians do end up sometimes in that chamber, in that house, until about 1 a.m. And it's not like the old days where the RNZ broadcast used to get cut off at 10 o'clock at night. You can still watch Parliament TV and all of us milling about in the chamber. But Parliament finished at 1 a.m. and we all came back to our offices across the Bowen House, and all of the cleaners were sat at the bottom of Bowen House waiting to get up there till after the MPs had finished their work for the day. So after all of these people who count themselves to be the representatives of this country went back into their offices, collected their stuff and left for the evening, these unsung heroes came in, cleaned up, reset the place so that we could do it all again tomorrow. And it just blew my mind that the cleaners were actually waiting for MPs to go back up to their offices and to get their stuff before they started their job. I made sure to pass on to Trevor Mallard, the Speaker of the House, that we absolutely could not require anybody by default or otherwise to wait for MPs to get about their business before they move on to, do their job. But it was just that stark contrast, right? That unintentional way that sometimes we slip into thinking that the work or the status or the power or the privilege or the position or the job title of certain groups or sectors or people in our society somehow make them worth more. And it's just fundamentally not true. It's just fundamentally not true. And that's where, getting to the conversation around the living wage, we should be advocating for a living wage, not just now, but in all circumstances. Nobody deserves to be living in less than dignity. That also is, that kind of question around dignity is also really coming to the fore right now with regard to students. So tonight, off the back of the package that was released the day before yesterday in support for students, the core kind of financial support part being to take out more debt. I have received a number of emails and Facebook messages and Instagram messages from all of you, and am bringing together a hui online, a zui as they're coming to be called on Zoom, for those who are interested in how we can help to build the mandate for a more progressive support package which has dignity attached and ensures that students who are simply looking to gain an education to not only further their own lives but to contribute to society in ways that we aren't yet even aware of, because that's what an education gives you, the ability to find new ways of doing things. We're hosting that Zoom at 6:30 p.m. tonight. You can find in the event section of my Facebook page how to sign up to that, because obviously we want to make sure that as we've seen in some international live streams, sometimes things can get hijacked. So we're just making sure that everybody is aware of what the rules are, and you'll get sent a Zoom link And we will have on there a number of different student media outlets, as well as the president of the New Zealand University Students Association, Isabella Lenihan-Eichen, who I think I'm saying her last name correctly, but she's wonderful and will give you all a rundown of what is being advocated for from kind of the peak student body, but also there has been a tautoko or support from the 44, I believe, different students associations across the country and polytechs, as well as at tertiary education institutions like universities. I also want to shout out to all of the parents who I also believe are deserving of dignity at this point in time. As it was put to me by a brilliant economist who has, I spoke to my good friend Marilyn Waring last night, who I'm not sure if we enough people know or have the due respect for the work that she does in 2020, but she is the former young one in New Zealand's parliament. She was the same age as me when she came in over 40 years ago now. She was actually a National Party MP for Raglan, but had values that I think perhaps are a little bit you can read her books and see what she thinks. But she later went on to discover what's now called feminist economics, and is actually one of the foremost world experts on well-being economics, which obviously is the way that we've sought to realign our thinking about value and the things that we measure in our economy and what actually contributes. And Marilyn was saying to me on the phone yesterday that the economy isn't closed. In fact, the economy is continuing to operate. You are still having parents that are doing huge amounts of unpaid labour that are not necessarily valued in our day-to-day society. You are still having people cleaning and cooking meals and doing a bunch of stuff. There's just less transactions being undertaken in the economy. And again, all of that continues to underline the fact that all of us should be able to live a life of dignity. And on this point, there has been a lot of kind of questions raised about things like pay cuts, for example, and obviously there was the announcement yesterday, which all Green ministers are taking up. But the long-standing Green Party policy has always been that MP pay shouldn't be tied to the whim or emotional state of Parliament or to political point scoring. In fact, the MP pay, as we believe and as we've long believed as the Greens, should be tied to increases or decreases in the average worker's wage, so that it's not simply about creating some announcement and, there's been decades of fights to this effect, essentially. And the fact that it hasn't been tied to those fluctuations in average worker pay has meant that there has been that runaway, effectively inequality. And on that inequality point, it needs to be said, because a lot of people right now are speaking meaningfully about the need for greater universal support for lifting the floor. But nobody's talking about how we necessarily achieve that. Obviously, there would need to be greater government spending if we want to do things like a universal basic income or to increase the support to our those who require it through the benefit, or to students, or to the elderly, or to the sick, or to those public servants who are on the front line of whether it's being cleaners or operating in our DHBs as nurses. The way that we pay for that and the way that we reduce inequality is through a fairer progressive taxation system. And I think that it is kind of a bit of a flawed proposition to be talking about pay cuts as opposed to talking about instituting long-term, sustainable changes to our taxation system. Because again, in the same way that right now the conversation is around pay cuts, it suggests that it's temporary. The same thing kind of occurs around the pay cuts for our most well-off, that is. And that's the same kind of conversation that's starting to come to the fore around our essential workers. The notion that this should be danger pay, not a living wage. And that suggests that it's temporary and that their worth is only this transient thing. If we want to reduce inequality, we know exactly how to do that. It is simply about making sure that those who are earning and own way more than enough are able to contribute to the society that helps support them to get to that position, and that all of us are able to live a life of dignity, and that support for our poorest is not left to the whim of charity and mythology about who is deserving while the poor suffer. So yeah, that's kind of the takeaway from today, folks, is that all of this stuff is achievable. We can change the tax system. We can change the systems that enable all of us to get that passport of a high quality education, opening the door to opportunities and to contribution to society. We have the ability to pay our essential frontline workers, to pay every worker in Aotearoa New Zealand a living wage. But in order to do that, we are going to have to lower the ceiling and raise the floor. We're going to have to reduce inequality. That's how we'll pay for it. I will leave all of you with that to digest for today. If you want to sign up to come to that hui tonight with the students, then please do. I myself am also actually still a student. I'm a postgrad student at Vic Uni. I did my undergrad at the University of Auckland, but full free and frank, the Victoria University of Wellington Students Association is my students association. We're getting a ton of comments coming in here. Frederick saying, besides GDP, what other economic indicators should we look at? The first one should be distribution of wealth. GDP simply measures the transactions within an economy. It doesn't measure the quality or the distribution of those transactions. The final thing that I just wanted to say in all of this is what all of you are doing right now is politics. What all of you are doing right now is engaging in a potential to change our society for the better. So don't leave it at watching a live stream during the lockdown. Continue to get engaged, and the most radical thing that you can do is to have these conversations with your friends and whānau. I have to get on to my 8:30 call, but ka pai, remember to stay home, stay safe, save lives, to be kind, especially to yourselves. Catch you tomorrow at 10.